This amendment would include these systems in the report under Section 602 strategy to achieve operation control of the border. It simply requires the Secretary of Homeland Security to also report to Congress on the feasibility of repositioning Department of Defense tethered aerostat radar systems no longer needed in Iraq and Afghanistan for use along the southwest border. The aerodynamic shape of the envelope and the tail fins provide a stable platform in the presence of modern winds and gusts. Its sensors have also been optimized for battlefield surveillance. The result is a form of survivable and permanent surveillance over key areas in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Now that we are drawing down troops and resources in the Middle East, this strategic surveillance technology will no longer be needed, so we should examine how this existing technology can be used to secure our own border. And just let me say in closing, Mr. Chairman, this is the kind of stuff that I think makes sense. Mr. Cuellar and I went down to the border and saw some Department of Defense sensor surveillance equipment that they are currently using now on the border. This type of technology not being used once we draw down our resources, I think can be put to their best use down on the southwest border. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Is there any further discussion on this? Mr. Cuellar from
Texas.
State of Texas is recognized for a maximum of 5 minutes.
I'll take 30 seconds. Again, I want to support Mr. McCaul on this. He is correct. I think these are assets that we can certainly use. And certainly, last time we got on one of those Civil Air Patrol planes and you fly over the river and the vegetation that you have, I think this will play a very important role in helping us secure the border. So I certainly want to show my support for this particular amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Just a quick comment on this, and I'm going to support this amendment. But as the feasibility study proceeds, we had some experience. There is a difference between the northern and the southern border, and our Canadian neighbors objected to an aerostat, actually, that was being piloted in my district. And they were very, very concerned about the eye in the sky and that we hadn't properly, the various agencies, discussed what was going on with our Canadian counterparts. Now, again, it's completely different culture, et cetera, than what you have on the southwest border. I'm going to support your amendment here. But as this is proceeding, if they take a look at doing anything similar along the Canadian border, they need to take into account the Canadians concerned about the thickening of the border, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this thing became such a huge issue. They kept calling it the balloon, that finally we had thousands of Canadians who actually all came together on a Saturday afternoon and did something they called Moon the Balloon across the border. So I just mentioned it was a very interesting thing, but that's what happened with one of these aerostats. So I know, I'm just telling you what happened there. So when you're doing these feasibility studies on the southwest border, that's great.
Good.
And I do think there are some portions of the northern border, actually, that this could be utilized as well. Probably not in this immediate area where I just explained it to you, but
Well, if the gentlewoman would yield.
Yes.
And I'm not going to get into the mooning part of it, but imagine if they would put a fence on the northern border, and imagine how the Canadians would have reacted on this. But I do understand we got to take in consideration of our neighbors, and certainly, we certainly will work with you on your concern. I think it's very important. And again, thank you, and I yield back.
And I appreciate that. The Canadians are very concerned about the possibility of some sort of fencing along the border as well. Again, you have unique dynamics on both borders, and we need to have operational control of both borders, but sensitivity has to be given to what kinds of things we are utilizing. And everything that happens on one border can't be the same utilization on the other border as well. But a lot can. Anyway, I certainly will support this amendment.
Was Robert Foss from the northern border? I think I recall him saying that fences make good neighbors, but I'm not sure if that was what he was referring to. The gentlelady yields back. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, the question is on agreeing to the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Mr. McCaul, number 30, or do you wish to offer it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The gentleman is recognized, and the clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 3116.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would amend Section 604 of the amendment in the nature of a substitute to authorize $5.4 million in additional funding for ICE's Border Enforcement Security Task Force, otherwise known as BEST teams. They began in Laredo, Texas. I'm not sure who the congressman is there, but they started in Laredo, Texas. They've been expanded now to 21 teams that began in Laredo, Texas, Mr. Cuellar. And it includes both northern and southern part of the borders in the United States. I can just tell you from personal experience, and I've been down there many times. I know Congressman Cuellar has been down there. These teams work. And I know I commend Congressman Cuellar for his authorization bill authorizing BEST teams, naming them after slain officer Jaime Zapata. And what it does essentially is it confiscates the cash and the weapons going south. What better way to strangle the lifeblood of the drug cartels than to take the cash and the weapons going south? And I had some stats I wanted to throw out, but in FY10, the BEST teams had about 1,700 criminal arrests, 960 administrative arrests, over 1,100 indictments, 871 convictions. In 2011, these numbers significantly rose with over 2,000 arrests, 1,100 administrative arrests, over 1,000 indictments, and almost 1,000 convictions. The good news is this additional funding will more than double the size of the BEST teams down on the border, which I think both sides of the aisle can agree have been very, very effective. It will add $15.4 million, resulting in over 50 additional teams to make over 5,300 arrests, to seize over 5,000 weapons and about 2,250 vehicles with nearly 2.5 million rounds of ammunition. This interdiction effort, I think, is the start to getting directly to the lifeblood of the cartels. And the pay for, I think, is even better. We took a failed program, the Department's Advanced Spectroscopic Portal Program, otherwise known as ASP, which even the Secretary of Homeland Security sent a letter to Chairman King deciding to cancel the ASP program, and this frees up the $15.4 million. And so I think this is a good use of funding. We need more resources down on the border. I know we're in tough budgetary times, but I think this is a creative way to provide that kind of funding that we desperately need to get after this crime and these drug trafficking organizations. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Chairman.
Chairman yields back the balance of his time. Who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly want to support this amendment. The BEST programs have really worked both in northern border and the southern border. In fact, one of the best things about it is that it coordinates the state, federal, local. So at one place, they'll put them all together. So this way, they'll be able to get intelligence from both the state and local folks also, but it also brings in their Canadian counterparts also and the Mexican counterparts also so they can share the information. So I think if we can more than double this, I think we got them even in New York City also. I think it would be something that would be, I'm dragging you. But I think this will certainly expand something that's been very successful. So I certainly support this amendment. I yield back the balance.
The gentleman yield for a minute. I also want to make the point that this is another creative way to pay for it, not only offset, but the asset forfeiture money. Right. The cash at sea, it's estimated about $30 billion has gone southbound. I don't know about the northern border. I'm sure that figure is high as well. I have been told by counsel that I wanted to redirect the asset forfeiture money that's seized by the BEST teams to go back to the BEST teams. Unfortunately, that requires an amendment to the criminal statute that falls within the Judiciary Committee. So I would ask that perhaps, Mr. Chairman, you and other like-minded individuals, Mr. Cuellar and I work on that standalone bill that we can get through the Judiciary Committee to make sure that the money seized by these teams goes back to pay for these operations. With that, I yield back. I yield back to the gentleman from Texas.
I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.